Well, see, he changed it a degree, his variation, and but he didn't change it in the field notes on there, and he said, but they changed that thing, and if you're lucky enough to get a hold of the field books, and I understand that, said she's going to talk about, maybe some of the field books, but we've got lots and lots of old field books that we've made an effort through the years to collect from different people.
After a while, we're gonna get her in here. We're gonna actually look at some of those field books. Just off the top of your head, don't you have some from Stiles, and who are some of the famous surveyors that you can think of off the top of your head?
We do have Colonel Stiles' field books and field work that he did, which has proved to be invaluable to us because all we had of Colonel Stiles was the article he wrote in the Law Review in 1952, and that's all we had was that one Law Review article. But now that I've got all these field books, it says if he didn't say it in the Law Review, well, they'd say that it just didn't happen, but it did happen. Sometimes when you look at the field.
He was really famous for helping establish the gradient boundary. He was one of the guys.
Right, he was one of the commissioners for the gradient boundary in the Oklahoma v. Texas case in the 1920s. Perpetuation is one of the big keys to surveying today, and so many times the ancient marks have disappeared. But if you're fortunate enough to find where somebody has come along later through the surveys and made these surveys, they may have found that stuff and they marked something, and you got perpetuation where you found theirs and they had found the original, and so on down through the line. Well, then you can make a pretty good survey, and a lot of that comes, I guess, from being here, for knowing. Like for example, I know so much of the land today, and I know who made their surveys on a lot of it. And even if I don't know, in the early days, people like Humble and Shell, American Republic Corporation, Houston Oil Company, Guff to some degree, Texaco, those people had complete engineering surveying departments. And they would go in, if they had a lease block, they would go in and survey that entire lease block before they'd ever drill a well. And of course, that's ancient. That was back in the 40s and the 50s and 1940s and 50s. And a lot of that information is still available. And you may have to go to the salt mines in Utah to get it. Wow. But if you know the people to get it, well, they can find it for you. And we've done that a number of times. And without it, it would be hard to do anything about it. We was in the vacancy case up in Upshur County, and Stanlin Oil and Gas Company back in the 1930s had made all types of surveys out there. And so we got their field books. We had their field books from the 1930s, and they found many of the original corners. And they'd come along and say, we found the original corner up here, and there's a vacancy in there, and say, well, it's a funny damn thing to me that, Stanlin Oil and Gas Company didn't find that when they were here, and they did find it down here, and that's what the courts would hold, Right. And today. I'd say that's one of the major things in relocating boundary lines is the perpetuation made by subsequent surveyors through the years, and you learn the ones that are good and the ones that are bad, but most of the oil company surveyors in those days were pretty doggone good.
Right. They had their own legal departments.
They had their own. They had their land. What they called it, a land department.
They collaborated with the General Land Office to make sure that they were actually following the footsteps of the original surveyors.
They did.
And in these days and times, here we are in the new century of, it's 2009. Most of the surveying is done by contract surveyors. Very few of the oil and gas companies have any survey departments.
That's true. That's very true. I don't know of any British Petroleum, which originally was Stanley Oil and Gas, and then they were Pan American, and then they were Amoco, and then they were BP, and now BP has bought out Arco, and that's all but they have records that go all the way back to the 30s. It came through this organization, and they're the only ones I know of today that has, well, Humble has, or ExxonMobil has one man in there that's in charge of all their surveying from here to Colorado, you know, and but BP has 3 or 4 people. They don't have any field crews. They hire field crews, but they still have 3 or 4 people in their office, and they're over all of this stuff. But Exxon is the ones I was thinking about that. You know, some of their records are in files in the salt mines somewhere over in Utah, and
why is that? I mean, I really
didn't have room to keep them. And well, for example, surveyor, registered professional land surveyor number 1 was Stuart Boyles, and he was had a contract with Humble, which is ExxonMobil today, and he did all of their work for them. Or they had a crew, but Mr. Boyles worked with them, and they made him. He left all his records to Humble, and they had him in their downtown Houston office building for a long time, right down the great big, tallest building in Houston. And I went down there and used their records several times, and I could tell when I was using them, I said, they're not going to leave these things here, because they had a great big area taken up of space. And so sure enough, they decided, you know, these old records, we're going to get rid of them. And but they did give them to the Houston chapter of the Surveyors Association there in Houston. And they were kind of like, what the hell are we going to do with them? But they wound up giving them to the Sam Houston Regional Library there in Liberty, which they handle a lot of old records that people have left to them, and those records are over there in that library. But you need to know where this is, and it's kind of like down at Corpus. All of the Blucher records are now out there at the college, you know, at Texas A&M Corpus, and a lot of those are invaluable, you know. They just and of course, when you say they're invaluable, they're either priceless or worthless. You know. You never know whether they're going to be worth anything or not, and then they could be priceless in some of these cases.
That's right.